The first beta of tvOS 18.2 has just landed, and we've got the realization now of a feature that I know I and a lot of Techthusiasts, a lot of other folks have been wanting for a long time, and that is ultra widescreen scope, aspect ratio support natively within Apple TV and tvOS. It was announced for tvOS 18, didn't come in the first release, didn't come in 18.1, but we have it now to play with in the developer first beta of 18.2. I've been looking at it, and I do have to say it's not necessarily exactly what I might have hoped for in every regard, but it does have some interesting behaviors as well that, depending on your system, it's going to be a question actually. Do you use the Apple TV native capability, or do you stick to your video processor if you have one? But in any case, I want to show this off and kind of break it all down. It's cool to see the feature nonetheless. I hope it goes through a little bit more rethinking and potentially some expansion and redevelopment as well before it's finalized. But in any case, to show that I've got the kind of ultimate setup, I think, to be able to demonstrate, understand, and apply this type of feature in a home theater environment, I do have a 163-inch, 235-ish to 1 aspect ratio screen over there. We'll be looking at that in a moment. Up over my left shoulder here is a JVC NZ900 projector passing its light through a Panamorph DCR lens, and everything is being managed and driven essentially through a MadVR NV Extreme Mark II. Alright, so first thing first, let's head over to settings in the Apple TV here, and let's show what we're looking at. So if I go down to System and I look at software updates, we can see that I'm running tvOS 18.2 version 22K5132E, last updated earlier today, actually November 5th, just a few hours ago from recording this video, and I am running beta updates for the developer profiles. I think this actually came out on Monday, not today. But the setting that we're looking for, it's under video and audio. It's at the very top in the video section called aspect ratio. The default setting is automatic, and it's currently running it as 16:9. Cool enough, we have a lot of different settings in here. 21:9, 237 to 1, 239 to 1, 240 to 1, very granular, a DCI 4K setting, and then a 32:9 to 1 for a super wide type of screen. And we have a little prompt here, a little bit of help that says Apple TV can detect the best aspect ratio for your television or projector. If you have an anamorphic lens or your television's aspect ratio is not detected, you can choose a different aspect ratio here. So the way that I've been running this setup prior to getting this, of course, having the anamorphic lens and needing to use anamorphic modes, is by letting all of the anamorphic management be done in the MadVR. So if we go in the MadVR here to the screen configuration menu, we can see there's an anamorphic lens option. Mine is currently set to yes, and it is set to a stretch factor of 1.25, which is the spec for the Panamorph DCR. So ultimately what happens is the source device sends its output signal, generally speaking in a 3840 by 2160 pixel array. The MadVR kind of squishes that image horizontally. It makes everybody and everything look really long and tall using the entire pixel space, vertical pixel space available to it. It outputs that signal after all of its other processing and stuff, of course, to the projector. That image passes through the lens. It is then vertically compressed, and everything lands on the screen like it's supposed to in the proper aspect ratio, using all the pixels, getting all of the extra light, and everything works very well. When the MadVR is actually watching something like an ultra widescreen movie, things can get pushed off the screen, and we have to use the black bar detection and that sort of stuff to deal with it. So there's something that I want you to pay attention to right now, and that's where the profile and time icon is showing up in the image. So right now the Apple TV is outputting as 16:9. It's outputting a 3840 by 2160 image field, and the time 7:11 p.m. with my beautiful little picture in the upper right hand corner is inside the actual image space of the UI here. Now I am going to go ahead and go in to the Apple TV app, and I'm going to start playback of a widescreen, an ultra widescreen movie, and I want you to watch kind of what happens here as the movie comes up. The information goes away, the MadVR is analyzing the space, and give it a second here, and boom, we get the pop up so that the ultra widescreen movie is filling the screen space available to it as defined within the MadVR. Now the problem is, if, hey, we got to use these Apple TV menus, well, they're down in the black space below the image. So if I click this, now the MadVR has to clamp it back down, and the more that I pull up, the more that it has to kind of clamp down and jump around, and we can see all of this changing that has to happen as the MadVR is identifying the actual information in the pixel space and adjusting everything accordingly. All the while, this image is being anamorphically, horizontally squished and then vertically compressed, and everything ends up on the screen basically the way it's supposed to, with a little bit of, again, jumping around and a little bit of kludginess. We go back to the menu. We're back to a native 16:9 menu. Now, what Apple could have done essentially is just allowed this ultra widescreen aspect ratio feature to essentially render a wider UI in the 3840 by 2160 pixel space with black bars above and below. And then for those that zoom up and those that are doing anamorphic processing somewhere else like the MadVR, then those would have done the squishing. It would have expanded to fill the pixel space, and everything would have worked out really well, and we would have had this really cool full scope native UI. But that's not what they did. They actually, in the design of this feature, they're actually seeking to replace the anamorphic processing that would be done in the MadVR or the projector. But it does actually work, and it creates some interesting logistics and changes in terms of how the Apple TV operates. So for my screen, I believe, again, like 235:1 aspect ratio, 21:9 is going to be the closest format. So if I put the Apple TV aspect ratio option into the 21:9 option, notice now everything is extra squished. That's because we're doing anamorphic processing times 2. So what I really need to do now is, if I'm going to let the Apple TV manage the anamorphic processing for this type of aspect ratio, I need to go into the MadVR and I have to turn it off, thus getting back to a final properly aspect ratioed image by virtue of having the lens. But again, this scaling and squishing kind of refactoring, anamorphic refactoring, is now being done natively in the Apple TV. If I switch to my Kaleidoscape, it's going to look very wrong, but for the Apple TV, we're looking correct. Here's the kicker, though. If I go back to the main menu, notice a couple things here. What they didn't do was actually make the core UI itself be a fully scope type image. The icons and the base field, the color, the color of the UI, it's not being expanded to fill the screen from the far left to the far right. It's not using all of that pixel space. If nothing else, I would have preferred them take the color, take the blue color of the Disney, and just push it all the way out to the sides. But if you're going to leave the icons, the same amount of icons and the same aspect ratios in the center, so be it. It would be nice to just fill color out to the side and kind of studying, instead of having like the ugly back bars. But notice where my profile thing is now. It's no longer actually in the colored 16:9 space. It's over in the far right. So they actually are using more of like the available field, essentially the field of view, in the entirety of the scope image. So what is being rendered actually did change by virtue of the fact that that profile icon shows up there to the far right. But now here's the kicker. Let's take a look at a movie again. And notice as I switch around in these different UIs, there is actually pixel information being filled to the far left and to the far right. Now this is a bit of a beta. I think they've got room to kind of clean this up a little bit in terms of how cleanly this presents and it transitions and things like that. So I won't be too harsh on it in that regard. But I do want to go back. Yeah, see, this time it actually only rendered inside the 16:9 space. Then it pops up. So there's some interesting things kind of going on. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start Endgame again. There's a lot of this where like it pops into the 16:9 field, but you give it a second basically and it'll fill itself in more. But now this is pretty cool. Now if we look at where the UI elements are rendering, they're actually rendering inside the picture space, the screen space image. So pulling up the menu, which would have formerly been in the black bars down below, is actually now in the image space. So some neat things are kind of happening here. And even if I go down, notice how the info screen is, again, it's rendering in the image space. It's not rendering significantly further below. So the MadVR really no longer, it's doing a little bit of clamping down in this specific one, but it doesn't have to clamp down as much, and it's not jumping in and kind of jumping out quite as much as it was doing before. This is actually a little bit better, more stable in that regard. So I think we've got a little bit of a win here. So that's an ultra widescreen movie. Let's go back. I'm going to go ahead and do Back to the Future. Back to the Future is a 185:1 aspect ratio movie, and this is pretty interesting. Take a look at this. We've got the movie image filling a 185:1 aspect ratio screen space. Everything looks the way it's supposed to. And again, the Apple TV menu system is now no longer in the black bars below the image. It's actually rendering to the left and right of the field, actually, there of the video image. And if I go down, so a little bit of a bug there again, things get cut off inside versus outside the pixel space. I think they can clean that up with just a little bit of development and bug fixing. But again, I can navigate around in here without the clamping down and the black bar detection, pop in, pop up, pop down kind of stuff that the MadVR needs to do. So all the while, again, maintaining proper like aspect ratio control and management. If I try something even a little bit older here, X-Men show, my son and I are watching the original 1990s X-Men cartoon. They were talking like old style 4:3 aspect ratio content. Same thing, right? The image of the cartoon itself is in its 4:3 field essentially, but the UI and whatnot is kind of rendered outside of that, kind of using more of the space. So all in all, I kind of get what they're trying to do here, but again, I think in some respects, I don't know, maybe there might have been some virtues to providing another mode whereby the menus just get rendered with black bars above and below in an ultra widescreen kind of menu view. Now, one thing that I was trying to experiment around with is what does this DCI 4K option actually do? And if I click this, it does go a little wider. It actually fills a little bit more of the screen with picture image. If I go back here, the icons actually, it's almost like stretching a bit. And we can see that the profile icon is up there to the upper right. But these are kind of stretched out icons. They're wider icons than you would expect. I thought maybe that this was sending like 4096 to output from the Apple TV, essentially through to the MadVR. However, if I look at the incoming signal information on the MadVR, it says the resolution is 3840 by 2160. However, it has a 167:1, noting it, interestingly enough, as a European theater aspect ratio. And so there is some manipulation, of course, here being done by the MadVR to kind of fill this up. So I'm not quite sure what they were getting at with this mode as an option. If we go ahead actually and take a look at it, let's just see what happens as well. Whoops, when we play Avengers Endgame here. So we've got some black bars kind of all around the image, above and below. Now the MadVR just kind of clamped everything back up. If I go down, we're getting some kind of really weird black bar insertion detection. So I don't think this is a mode that I would really look to use. I think if you have a 235 or a 237 or a 240 aspect ratio screen and you wanted to have the Apple TV actually do this type of anamorphic management and stuff, regardless of other elements of 4096 versus 3840 pixels, I think you, in my opinion, want to kind of just stick to very, very specifically the native aspect ratio. Now I do want to show this really quick. This is the Kaleidoscape UI set into its ultra-wide interface mode. I am back to having the MadVR do the anamorphic processing, and what we can see here is actually, I think, a better use of an ultra widescreen scope menu. I wish Apple would borrow a little bit from this idea. Use the entire ultra widescreen space for UI elements and icons and stuff like that. When you put your Kaleidoscape in ultra widescreen mode, I think you see roughly about 4 more columns of movie covers, 2 on the left, 2 on the right, than you would natively see in the 16:9 style interface. So you're actually getting more information. You're always making sure that the menus and everything as well kind of always appear on the screen like you would want them to. but you're actually getting a little bit more value, I think, more interface value, more covers, more details and info when it's in this mode. So imagine if Apple did something actually like this. It would be pretty cool. If you're in your Apple TV app library, you could see more movie posters, more movie thumbnails, covers, and that sort of thing. So this is a pretty interesting feature. I think they're on the right track with this, and I think they have some interesting concepts in terms of what they're doing. The stability of being able to always have the UI elements be in the screen space without having to have something popping in and popping out and doing like that black bar aspect ratio management, I think is pretty cool. But I think there's also some room to explore maybe a couple different kinds of settings and some other options in there. I think it also begs the question is how useful is this actually? Because I think in most cases people may have more than one video device in their chain. You may have an Apple TV, you may have a Blu-ray player, you may have a Zedo, you may have a Kaleidoscope. And if some of these devices can do anamorphic processing now and some of them can't, then, and you're switching them all essentially through the same video chain, then you have to have something consistently providing the anamorphic processing. The likely place to do that would of course be a MadVR or potentially in a projector itself. And so it could actually throw a little bit of a monkey wrench into your setup in the way that your different sources operate. Now, one of the cool things ultimately with like the MadVR NV Extreme is it has a very powerful profile system, and the profiles can actually be set up for different like virtual input devices. So we can have a virtual profile specifically for the Apple TV where the anamorphic mode is turned off and the anamorphic support is turned on in the Apple TV itself. But other sources could use a other common device profile where the anamorphic mode is turned on in the MadVR itself. The stretch factor is set, and then using Control 4 and stuff like that, very easy to automate putting the MadVR in a specific device profile mode when you switch to a given input or you switch over to a given device. I'm eager to talk to some of my friends that know the MadVR very well, like Sammy Prescott Jr. and whatnot, and kind of see if they've already checked this out and discuss the ramifications or the trade-offs of having the Apple TV do the anamorphic processing versus having the MadVR do it. So this is definitely something to play with, and I think probably there's a how-to video idea in there coming specifically showing how to set up the device profiles for different devices with anamorphic settings. It also kind of makes me want to potentially revisit the different options that are in the Kaleidoscope in terms of ultra widescreen support. There are specifically like letterbox options, I think, and anamorphic options where maybe, just maybe, because of the way that things render and different elements of the UI rendering above and below or to the left and the right of different screen elements, hey, I only really run an Apple TV and a Kaleidoscope in here. Maybe I can have both of those devices just run in their anamorphic modes and then turn off the anamorphic mode in the MadVR itself. So we've got stuff to explore here. We have stuff to debate. Sound off in the comments. Let me know, what do you have in your video chain based on kind of what we're learning about this feature? How would you actually intend to use it? I think certainly if all you had was an Apple TV, a projector, and a lens, rather than having the anamorphic stuff managed in the projector, it probably makes sense to turn on the anamorphic mode in the Apple TV. So I think there will actually be some certain installation situations where it does really make sense to use this feature. It'll be curious how it goes and how it develops. I really hope they do expand the whole field of the UI. I think there's more better things that they can do with it, clean it up a little bit, of course, but they're on a cool track, and hey, we'll see where it goes. Stay tuned here to the channel, of course. This is a very important configuration aspect of my own room, and it's definitely going to be something that I will make some additional content about, and we'll be covering this whole thing as it evolves. As it is, sound off in the comments. Let me know what you think about it. What do you want them to do? How would you use this or not use it in your system? Leave some comments. Let's discuss. Okay, if you want to buy any of this awesome home theater gear, Kaleidoscopes, JVC projectors, Panamorph lenses, you want to do an anamorphic setup, I can help you out through a whole lot of it. Reach out to me, Jeremy at techthusiasm.net. I can consult, I can advise, I can sell a whole bunch of different home theater brands, sell and support as an authorized certified dealer. And if I can't help you, I've got business partners and referrals that can. If you'd like to help me out as well, hey, use all of those other general affiliates down in the description. Amazon, Target, Best Buy, Walmart, Newegg, there's a whole bunch of them down there. I really appreciate you, your spouse, your significant other, your family, whatever, clicking through those links and helping me out so I can buy more stuff, do more things, make more content, and help have some fun and educate you on this whole audio video home theater hobby as well. Otherwise, please like, subscribe, hit the bell, share the video. Again, leave that comment. Let's talk about this. This is, I think, a very interesting development in the path of the Apple TV. Thanks for watching, and come on back for a whole lot more home theater discussion and fun.